Joining us on the phone right now is a very good friend of ours, Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. But as I always say, in talking about South Carolina and Lindsey Graham, he represents South Carolina great, but he does a great job for all of us, especially those of us concerned about the situation with the war on terror, or what the president doesn't want to call the war on terror. But Senator Graham, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I saw your petition. You're doing a good thing here.
Thank you. Let me ask you this. I, last month, made a presentation at Oxford University in England on the situation with ISIS. There was one of the experts in the area who's pretty left of center and thinks you can negotiate just about everything. But when it came to ISIS, he said you've got to crush them. Those were his words from this guy that was very left of center on these kind of issues. Senator, you've been very outspoken on this. What is the danger we're facing with ISIS right now?
The gentleman said you have to crush them. He's right. First, you got to establish what kind of threat do they present, and what's the best strategy to contain that threat. They represent a threat to the stability of the Mideast. This is a war against mankind, not just a particular religion. They represent a threat to our homeland. According to the FBI director, the director of national security, the CIA director, the attorney general, and the director of homeland security have all said that the ISIS safe haven in Syria, now Iraq, represents a direct threat to our homeland. They're not a terrorist organization. They're a terrorist army. They're emboldened. They have $2 billion of assets under their control. They have a large cache of weapons. So what you have to do is create multiple fronts against them. The key to winning a war, or any other battle, is to create more problems for your enemy than they're creating for you. So I would consider this threat from ISIS the largest and most significant threat to our homeland since 9/11. I would hit them on multiple fronts with partners. I would partner with the Iraqi new government to try to rally the army, pull the Sunni Iraqis away from ISIS inside of Iraq and hit them from the south. I would heavily arm the Kurds, who are good fighters, to hit them up north using American air power in support of both the Iraqi army and the Kurdish Peshmerga. I would hit them in Syria, because if you don't hit them in Syria, that's where their command and control exists. That's where their supply depots exist. I would try to rally what's left of the Free Syrian Army to create a ground offensive against them. I would ask my military commanders, give me a strategy to diminish and defeat these guys. If I need boots on the ground, I would consider that, but I think we can do it without boots on the ground. But I'd come up with a strategy not only to protect humanitarian needs of the Iraqi people, but to deal with the threat they present to the homeland and to the Western world in general.
Senator, you just said, and this is a theme we've been dealing with as well, this kind of clash of civilizations here, clash of worldviews, a battle against mankind. When you look at the nature of the threat, I noticed yesterday that David Cameron and the Parliament had authorized military weaponry to be sent directly to the Kurds, effective today. The French have already started that process. Let's talk about our reaction here, because it's not just, as you mentioned, there's, of course, there is, and I never want to downplay the humanitarian aspect of it and the massacre of Christians that's taking place. I mean, this group is marking Christians with a symbol of N for Nazarene, and then killing many of them, kids included, and putting women into sex slavery. I mean, it's horrendous. But when you talk about the sheer threat potential and lethality of which they control and the money, there were reports this morning, and you're a judge advocate general as well in the military, in the Air Force. When you look at this threat compared to where we've been with the Al-Qaedas of the world, how do you put this on the level of danger?
Oh, I'd put it at the most significant threat to the homeland and to our way of life since 9/11. They've got a list of things they want to accomplish. They want every Muslim in the region to bend to their will. They want an Islamic caliphate that has to adhere to the most extreme Sunni version of Islam. And when they conquer a town, they impose that form of religion. If you're a Christian or you're a Shiite, you're an infidel, and your fate is certain. They also want to drive us, the United States, out of the region because we're an impediment to being able to accomplish their goals. As to the Christian population, they want to eradicate it by three different means: conversion, displacement, or death. And they're actually executing their battle plan.
Yep.
They want to destroy the state of Israel, and on the list is to strike the American homeland. My problem with President Obama is he doesn't level with the American people. Every intelligence agency in America has told members of Congress and the president this is a great threat growing in nature, and the president talks about internal politics inside of Baghdad. He doesn't understand, I believe, that his lack of strategy to deal with this threat is allowing these guys to get stronger, and he will not go where I want to take him, because if he did, it would be an admission that his foreign policy of leading from behind, a small footprint, disengagement has failed. He's vain and stubborn to a fault.
You know, I get this sense, Senator, that he's almost blinded by this kind of I won't put on the same level of Chamberlain necessarily, but he's kind of blinded by a desire to appease, as if you kind of work the situation and make a speech, it'll go away. I mean, the White House is claiming victory because the people that were on top of the mountain, the numbers weren't as great. A lot of people were able to get out because of our United States Air Force. But that we kind of characterize ISIS as water. They go to the area of least resistance and then use every power they have to move forward. So they get off the mountaintop and they go to another place. This threat isn't over because the mountain, so to speak, has been liberated.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary. I think what the president's trying to do is not embrace the reality of the failure of his foreign policy. We told him 3 years ago that if you don't deal with Syria decisively, a vacuum will be created in Syria. There was a moment of opportunity to take Assad out. Hezbollah came to Assad's aid. Russia came to Assad's aid. Iran came to Assad's aid, and we backed off from the Syrian Free Army. These foreign fighters called ISA moved from Iraq into Syria. They come from all over the world, and his bad bets have blown up in his face. His indecision over a 3-year period has caught up with him and is going to catch us here. President Bush made many mistakes early on in the Iraq War. He underestimated the number of troops we'd need to bring security to Iraq. We wrote it off as a few dead enders. Back then, Senator McCain and myself criticized President Bush, asked for Rumsfeld to be fired because he didn't understand the threat. President Bush, to his credit, adjusted his strategy.
Right.
All leaders make mistakes. The key to being a good leader is how you adjust your strategy. He is playing to our war weariness. He is worried more about his left base than I think he should, and he's not rising to the moment. And as a Republican, I will help him, give him what support I can to defeat this enemy. I will not empower his behavior to allow this enemy to get stronger because of domestic politics.
Senator, there's the second aspect of that, and I really appreciate what you're saying here, is when you make the statement that the 3 years of the policy, 4 years of policy are now catching up with us. We're hearing from people from all over the country. Our response have been record numbers of people listening to broadcasts, people responding. But they're asking for hope here. I mean, people want to know, what can we do? What can the Senate do? How do we move on this? And how do we move on this in a way that protects the interests of the United States? You're talking to a lot of people right now on this radio broadcast. What would you tell them? Because people are looking to you because you are one of the leaders, if not the top 2 or 3 leaders in the country on this issue. You've been an outspoken, direct asset, I call it, to get the truth out. What do we do here? What can the American – there's this pent-up frustration across the political spectrum of we need hope. We need to do something. This is, it looks like people, everybody seems to be saying it's the most dangerous situation. What do we do?
Well, I think the first thing we got to realize that in our constitutional democracy, there's only one commander-in-chief, not 535. So what can we do? As a Republican, I am trying to stamp out this disengagement strategy that's also in existence in our party. They're members of my own party who want to take a laissez-faire, let's lead from behind, Fortress America approach to radical Islam. Radical Islam won't defeat itself. Somebody has to engage. The good news for us is that Muslims throughout the world, generally speaking, do not want to live under this ISA thumb, that Western Europe is threatened too. There is a coalition within the Mideast and Western Europe that we could form that could deal decisively with this problem, but it takes leadership. What can you do? You can sign your petition. The petition you have to protect the Christian populations is long overdue. You can send it to every member of the House and the Senate. There's political fear in America that if we talk about re-engaging in war in the Mideast, that somehow you're risking your job. My job is to be honest with the people of South Carolina, clearly define the threats we face. Here's the threats we face. Radical Islam is stronger than ever. There are more terrorist organizations, more safe havens, with more money, more capability, and more weapons to strike the homeland than before 9/11. Bin Laden was killed. That was a seminal moment held as the turning the tide of battle. From Bin Laden's death to now, there are more terrorist threats than ever against our homeland. It's just not in Iraq and Syria. It's in Libya. It's in northern Africa. So what can your audience do? You can pray for the people of Israel because they're under siege by radical Islamists. You can pray that our country's leadership will wake up and deal with the radical Islamic threat that is not just a war against Christians. It's a war against a loving God and mankind, and there is no place for second. There's no prize for second place. Rally our political leadership. Don't let them off the hook. I've made a challenge all over America to any member of Congress. If you disagree with my assessment that they represent a threat to the homeland, ISIS, please come forward and let's have that debate. Have you not been to these meetings I've attended? Have you not been listening to what our intelligence community says? So, one, I want to call out every member of Congress. Do you agree that they are a threat to the homeland? Can you find a force within the Mideast that can defeat this threat without American air power as a minimum? What is your strategy to keep the war from coming from there to coming here? So push political leaders, particularly in the Republican Party, to get a spine and push the president to come up with a strategy to protect the populations over there that are at risk, but also to protect our homeland.
You know, there's an interesting quote, Senator. I appreciate what you just said, from Benjamin Disraeli, the British Prime Minister. And he said in dealing with the Middle East, he called it a lifetime and lifelong occupation when you're dealing with the Levant, with the Middle East. And the sense that this is just going to go away, which you've successfully made very clear it's not, just by closing our eyes, is something that the American people need to hear. You made a statement. I want to follow up on it if I can, and this is a concern that I have. There are some, even within the Republican Party, that are taking this kind of, as you say, laissez-faire attitude, but almost to just ignore it as if it'll go away, and it's not our problem because, it's not directly impacting the United States, which I think is a really false statement considering the leader of ISIS said when he was released from prison in Iraq, said, "I'll see you in New York." But we've got to get that across to members, of course, Democrats and Republicans, but even within the Republican Party, the Republican members of Senate, there are some that are saying that position. How, do we just deal with it head on? Have these our people call these senators saying we must engage here?
Well, you have been one of the few voices. Remember during the dark days of when this isolationist doctrine began to dominate the Republican Party, when we had one amendment after another,
right,
turning the war into a crime. If we caught an American citizen who was collaborating with Al-Qaeda, that they had to be read the Miranda rights. They couldn't be held under the law of war. Remember how me and you and just a handful of us fought back?
Right.
Well, now how many people believe if you caught an American citizen coming back from Syria, the last thing I want them to hear is you have the right to remain silent.
Right.
They have collaborated with the enemy. They should be held under the law of war, which is legal.
Right.
The Supreme Court has said that an American citizen can be an enemy combatant. So the only thing I want to say is that you and your team have kept a clear-eyed view that there's a difference between fighting a war and fighting a crime. To the people in the Republican Party who don't get this, libertarians are a very important part of our coalition, but I'm not a libertarian. I don't believe in Fortress America. I believe that America should shape the world. I'm a Ronald Reagan Republican who wants to take evil head on before it gets here. We need lines of defenses throughout the world. We had a chance. The surge did work. Obama blew it. We had a chance to turn Iraq into a stable place. We had that same opportunity in Afghanistan. But no, he withdrew, and he's claiming it wasn't his decision. That's a bald-faced misstatement, rewriting of history. To the Republican Party, get back to your roots of being peace through strength. Don't become Fortress America. Don't get to Obama's left. Take the fight to radical Islam before it's too late. We have a chance to elect a new president in 2016. We have a chance to elect new members of the House and the Senate. Push every member of Congress running for office to clearly define who they are in terms of national security.
Senator Lindsey Graham, I can't thank you enough for being with us. I appreciate your work, and I appreciate your friendship. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Jay, very much.
Great.